I don't know about you, but I cannot believe that we are already going into week 7 for the fantasy football season. And if you're just like me, you are either looking to bolster up your rosters because of injuries, maybe a player is disappointing. But the point is, it is so crucial for us to go over players that you can utilize to retool your rosters. And in this video, we are going to be going over 5 different players that you got to be targeting to help improve your rosters as we get into week 7 of the fantasy football season. And with that, we're going to go over 2 specific ones. And they're going to be 2 pass catchers from the exact same team. And both of them are actually last named with Johnson. That's going to be Cameron Johnson as well as Tez Johnson from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Both of these guys are essentially not rostered in any roster right now. The percentages currently are at 0% for Cameron Johnson and 0.7 for Tez Johnson. And the reason why we are going to be targeting these guys is because, unfortunately, for the wide receiver room for the Buccaneers, we are seeing some major injuries. For starters, we unfortunately saw Emeka Egbuka suffer an injury with his hamstring. We have had Chris Godwin out with the fibula, and we also had Mike Evans out this past week as well, and there's so many question marks on whether or not these guys will be available. And with that, I'm just so confident with Baker Mayfield and how he's been playing. And I think that any pass catcher that is receiving any passes from him is going to truly benefit in fantasy, which is why right now I would target either of these 2 guys to be effective additions to your roster. And this past week, we saw Cameron Johnson play 49% of the snaps, had 4 receptions on 4 targets, 64 yards, and had a touchdown. And we saw his counterpart, Tez Johnson, have 1 reception on 3 targets for 45 yards and a touchdown. And as I said, we have some question marks on what is going to be happening with some of these primary pass catchers with Godwin, Egbuka, as well as Mike Evans. But the point is, if these guys are all going to be out, I am so confident with any Tampa Bay pass catcher, especially considering the matchup in week 7, because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going up against the Detroit Lions, who actually allow the 4th most points to opposing wide receivers on a points per game basis. And if you are operating out of a fab system, I would spend no more than 5 or 10% of your fab to get these guys on your rosters. If you are a Rams fan, or maybe just a fan of Puka Nacua, or like me, you have him on one of your fantasy rosters, you were not happy to see him not be able to finish the game because of injury, and it sounds like he may be missing some extended period of time as well. But the point is, though, we have a option for you that could help out, and that's going to be wide receiver Jordan Whittington out of the Los Angeles Rams. Currently, he's only rostered in 0.2% of ESPN leagues, and I know that all the talk is going to be about Devontae Adams and how you're going to see an uptick in volume, and I believe that that is going to be very much true. But Jordan Whittington is going to be now the wide receiver 2 for this Rams offense, and he's been someone that has already secured that wide receiver 3 role for this team, and there's still question marks as far as who else will emerge in this wide receiver room. But for now, I would look to actually hedge my bets on him being more productive with Puka Nacua out. We saw this past week, he played 49 snaps, which actually accounted for 92% of the team snaps. And I know that his stat line wasn't all that impressive because we didn't see a full uptick. However, just the hope on what he is going to provide with him filling in for Puka Nacua out, it should be more than enough to give me optimism as far as how he can produce for this Rams offense. Currently, right now, they are also getting ready to play versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in week number 7. And the reason why you like that matchup is because the Jacksonville Jaguars have so far allowed the 8th most points to opposing wide receivers on a points per game basis. All these reasons are why I would look to target him off waivers. Again, very similar to that of the first guys that we mentioned, not spending more than 10% of your fab to add him on your roster, especially if you are pretty depleted at the wide receiver position. This next player that we are going to be targeting is going to be Bam Knight, running back out of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, if you were like me, I had Michael Carter ready to go on Sunday. Really happy to see what he would do filling in for my injured players, but we got an early report Sunday morning that Bam Knight was going to be getting the workload as the starter for the Arizona Cardinals, and thankfully, he didn't disappoint. Currently, he's only rostered in 5.6% of ESPN leagues, and his stat line wasn't all that impressive. He had 11 carries on 34 yards, at least got into the end zone, so he got you about 13 or 12 points in PPR formats. He also had a reception for 20 yards as well, which looked really impressive. And his counterpart, Michael Carter, still was involved in the game, had 9 carries, 34 yards, also had 2 receptions for 30 yards as well. And the big difference here is that Bam did outsnap Carter, 51% of the snaps versus Carter's 44%, and this basically didn't give us much information, but I did warn you that even if you were to flare up Michael Carter, this is before we knew much about Bam Knight, we knew that the matchup versus Indianapolis was going to be a tough one, and we know that going into this matchup in week 7 versus Green Bay, you're going to see an even tougher matchup, so you still want to be able to temper expectations when it comes to Bam Knight. However, if we get a clear indication that he is going to be the #1 running back option for the Cardinals with Benson out, I would feel very confident just spending also 10 or 15% of my fab just to get him on my roster, especially if you are depleted at the running back position with injuries, because I know that we have some sad reports that unfortunately Ivan Hampton looks like he may miss an extended period of time beyond the 4-week requirement that comes from a player that's put on the IR. With that said, if you are depleted, I think Bam Knight becomes a solid option for you to fill in that void at running back. Hey, we have 2 more players to go over, but before we do so, we are so close to 1,000 subscribers here on the channel, and I tell you right now, we cannot do this without your support, and most of you that are watching these videos unfortunately are not subscribed, so do me a solid. If you are getting value in these videos, hit that like button as well as the subscribe button. Let's go over these last few players. And this next player is going to be Kimani Vidal, running back from the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, this was a player that we spoke about last week, but he only was rostered in 27.1% of ESPN leagues going into week 6, and after the game that we saw in week six, I just can't imagine him keeping that roster percentage that low anymore. So I would consider maybe 20 to 25% fab on this player, considering the stat line that he had. And to be fair, we didn't know who was going to be the guy that was going to take over this backfield in the absence of Ivan Hampton, because you had Kimani Vidal, you had also Haskins there in the mix as far as who would take out carries for the Chargers. But we saw Vidal emerged as the superior running back. He had 18 carries, 124 yards, also caught 3 receptions on 4 targets for 14 yards as well as a touchdown, whereas you had Haskins with 6 carries, 14 yards, only had 1 reception for 9 yards, and it was clear with a discrepancy with the snaps. You saw Vidal play 67% of the snaps versus Haskins 31%, and it was quite impressive to see how well Vidal looked in this offense. So I expect to see the same kind of output in week 7, and with the Chargers facing the Indianapolis Colts in week 6, just like I told you last week when the Cardinals were facing the Colts, temper expectations with your running backs, because the Colts, despite giving up a pretty solid game to Bam Knight, still allow the 8th fewest points to opposing running backs on a points per game basis. And even though Vidal is the guy that it looks like will be the RB1 for now, I still think it's worth at least stashing Haskins, because you never know what will happen in this backfield, and if there's a change in the guard, you'd rather be a little early to that than opposed to having to scramble late and maybe put a higher bid than you would like to right now when he is at his lowest price. And the final player that we're going to be throwing out your way for the waiver wire ad is going to be Michael Mayer, Titan for the Las Vegas Raiders. Now listen, he looked great filling in for Brock Bowers. Unfortunately, Bowers was a late scratch for the Las Vegas Raiders, even though there was so much speculation that he would not be available for this game because of the injury that he's had to his knee. And Mayer filling in did not disappoint. He had 5 receptions on 7 targets, 50 yards, had a touchdown, good for Titan 5 on the week in fantasy. And the thing is, what made Mayer effective is that he led the team with 7 targets and also tied for first among all Las Vegas Raiders pass catchers in total snaps with 56. Michael Mayer is only rostered in 3.1% of ESPN leagues, so I would definitely put out a bid to add him to your roster, considering that Bowers should be not available for the Raiders in week 7 as they get ready for the week 8 bye. But I will say, be careful with the matchup in week 8, because the Raiders are going up against the Kansas City Chiefs, who actually allow the 6th fewest points to opposing tight ends. Now, I believe that because of the volume that Michael Mayer should be getting, he should at least keep a solid floor for you at the tight end position going into week 7. Hey, you made it to the very end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. I truly appreciate it. Hey, listen, if you got any value in this video, do me a huge solid and hit that like button as well as the subscribe button, and check out some of these other videos that we have here on the channel that'll help you out to improve your fantasy rosters. And be sure to tune in towards the end of the week where I go over some must trades that you should be targeting to help improve your teams. And lastly, best of luck as you place your waiver wire bids, and in the meantime, take care, God bless, peace.